What?
Before because we're about to spit some fire. So
Well,
just
about
press
to get
start.
in it. What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to the sit down. I don't even know what episode this is now. As you can tell, things are a little slow right now because I've been working on getting the man, the myth, the absolute legend. This is my good friend Barak. Just got back from Tel Aviv, Israel. This is my guy right here, my good friend from high school. We kicked it, we crushed it, and Barak, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. It's been a heck of a journey trying to get you on here. I'll tell you what, it's has not been easy.
It has not been easy. It is an honor to be on here. I want to keep this as least formal as possible. Like, I understand it's your podcast, but we have always been very good friends.
Wow.
And just because we're on a podcast now does not mean that rapport is going to change. I'm going to talk to you the way I'm going to talk to you tomorrow and forever. And so it is an honor, but it's also, as a very good friend of yours, this is exciting to be on. And I'm glad now that I'm back in the States, we were able to coordinate this because the time difference in Israel with here and you and me, and
Tough.
we're here now. That's all that matters.
Hey, that's it. And dude, let's jump right in. We were kind of talking a bit, and hey, same thing here. Listen, just because we're on a podcast, just because we're on camera, ain't nothing changed,
Of
bro.
course,
Ain't
of course,
nothing
of
changing.
course. Nothing.
But
Of course.
we were talking off camera a little bit about how our relationship sort of grew, right? And obviously, we got our start over at Pomfret Prep. Shout out to Pomfret Prep.
Shout
Um,
out.
Barak, you were a PG. I was a super senior. So we were very similar in the sense that we were both in very similar points in life. And I think in terms of maturity, I think in terms of experiences, right? And I think that's why we got along so well, and that's why you were always my guy, right? And, when I kind of think back, to our relationship, to where it is now, there's a couple of points that really kind of stick out for me. And one of those things with you is that my senior year in high school, I had completely destroyed my knee, right? And you were a part of the process, pushing me, helping me get better, asking me how's it feeling, how's everything going. And
Mm.
then lo and behold, go to Elmira, get recruited for basketball, and what happens?
Tear mine. Tear
tear,
mine.
tear your ACL, right? And I'll
Yeah.
never forget this, because we hadn't talked in probably a year, maybe, on and
Just to
off.
so yeah, but you're not. I just want to, for clarification. So yeah, I after Pomfret, I played at Elmira for 2 years, and then I transferred from Elmira to Curry. I did freshman and sophomore at Elmira, junior and senior at Curry, and the day before my first year at Curry, the day before my first year junior year, I tore the ACL. So I had already. It doesn't really matter. Like, I'm just providing some
Oh
context for
yeah,
the timeline. So yeah, it was 2 years since we graduated. Yeah, 2 years since we
yep.
graduated from when you tore yours and I tore mine. Obviously, we had spoken between, but on the not on a consistent basis because I had gone to school, you had gone to school, and so
That's life, man. That's life.
yeah.
But I'll never
So sorry to
forget.
cut you off.
No, you're
Yeah.
good. But I'll never forget that. When it just one day I just get a phone call. Barak Schwartz comes up on my phone, and we have that. Remember that picture I showed you? that,
Of course,
that picture from
of
the
course,
auditorium where I'm just looking like a straight goomba.
both of us. Just 2014 knuckleheads.
Oh my goodness, just too much. Just too
Way too
much.
much. Just
But
so much.
like, thank you, bro. What? But you would call me and you're like, dude, I gotta ask you some questions. I was like, ask me some questions. You told me about the whole process with the ACL, and I'll never forget that conversation we had. It was like we were still in high school. It
Mm.
was like almost an hour long, and you were just asking me questions. What did you do? What kind of approaches did you take? What was your mindset? How did you get through it mentally? Right? And I was just like, man, that stuck with me. That really, really
Mm.
stuck with me. But for you, Barak, kind of tell me sort of just about that initial journey in terms of the ACL tear, athletics, because we're going to get into your career path pretty soon here. And
Mm-hmm.
me knowing you the way I do, I know that shaped how you got to where you are now. So kind of
100%.
dive into that a little bit.
I want to back up a tiny bit because the ACL was not the first injury I had. The ACL was, depending on who you ask and how you look at it, could have been considered one of the more severe. I would argue that it wasn't. When I was 16, I, in layman's terms, shattered my back. I was put in a back brace for half a year, 23 hours a day. And that was going into my senior year of high school. And at the time, I was getting some solid recruitment from Division II and Division III schools around the Northeast and being sidelined that summer and then beginning of my senior year, I didn't have any recruiting at all. It just went out the door. And that's one of the reasons I ended up going to Pomfret, was to regain some of that time that I missed. And going into Pomfret, I ended up shattered. I had stress fractures in both of my tibias, so my right and left tibia, and I was crushed. And I had two options. One was to just rest and not play, and two was to play through it. Now, having decided to go to Pomfret as a PG, I had no choice but to play, because
Right.
that year was for me to regain that time I missed from my back. So I just pushed through it, and probably did a lot of damage looking back, and knowing what I know now is what I do as a career. But that got me into somehow a little bit of recruitment, and that led me to Elmira. And at Elmira, the shins, still to this day, I'm talking to you as a 26-year-old, the shins are problematic if I am playing a ton and doing a ton of stuff. And unfortunately, due to that year at Pomfret, I think that put in some long-term damage, and
Mm.
that's how the cards are dealt sometimes, and that is what it is. But during my time at Elmira, I had compartment syndrome in my leg, and I fractured my ankle a couple times, and just basketball turned into rehab. Like, I was playing less basketball and I was playing more rehab. I
Mm.
was just always sidelined. I was always doing something with a trainer. I was always an hour early before practice trying to do whatever warm-up routine, whatever breathing routine, whatever foam, you name it. Like, I've done it. CAT scans, MRIs, x-rays, surgeries, crutch, you name it, I've done it. And that process became routine and habit for me, because I had no choice but to do that just to be able to play. And, you know, my decision to go to Curry wasn't solely based off basketball. In fact, basketball was not my priority at that point. My priority was to come back closer to my family, to my brother, to my late dog. My dog was a huge part of my decision, to be able to come back and spend time with him. Um, and to be able to be in a city where I could network beyond basketball and into open doors that I wanted to for a career. Because at that point, even before that, when I met you at Pomfret, my head was in a different place. My head was already thinking 4, 5, 6 years down the road. And basketball was a part of it. Like, I wanted to continue to play basketball, but I knew that if I was stuck in Elmira and wasn't able to play, I would have been miserable. So I said, I will be fine with going back to Boston, studying. If I don't play, I don't play. At least I'm next to my family. And I ended up continuing to play. I played at Curry. Now, the day before I moved into Curry, I tore my ACL. And so I didn't play my junior year. That was I still have 1 year of eligibility left, because, I played 3 years. could go back and knock on Curry's door and play. So the reason sorry, I went on a rant, but the reason I mention all that stuff to you is, it wasn't, one thing. It was 7 or 8 years
Right.
of consistent physical adversity. 7 and 8 years of the toughest physical and mental adversity I've ever faced. That actually might not, in terms of basketball. What happened with my dog also affected me a ton, but that's not for this podcast. But the ACL, it's interesting you asked me, and that now that I'm thinking about it more and more, I was destroyed, right? I couldn't play ball. It
Mm-hmm.
affected my whole life, but I was so close to home. I was so close to my brother. I came home for surgery. I was on my living room floor. There's a picture of me and my brother and my dog. We're hugging each other. Like, if I had to go through that at Elmira, I would have been in a really bad place. So the decision to come to Pomfret, I think, kept me a little bit more sane, having been closer to home. And I accomplished other things off the court. I was able to intern with the Celtics, and I was able to really build my network and resume, and do the things that I knew that were beyond basketball. But, and I might be jumping ahead a little bit, but, considering what I do now, and we'll get into that in a second, the process and the road and journey that I went through and still sort of go through in terms of injuries and rehabs and doctors and surgeries and you name it, that is all essentially, those are the things that led me to do what I do today. And being someone who was an injured, frustrated athlete, at one point I used to always consider it one of my life's biggest failures, because I never actually was able to fully play at my potential. I believe in that. To this day, until I die, I don't really think I was able to really reach my potential as a basketball player. And I used to think of that as more of a failure. But looking back and considering what I do today, it's my life's biggest asset. Like, those things led me to doing what I do today. And now I'm trying to help athletes get to the point that they don't have to go through what I went through.
Mm.
And that's my reason. That's my purpose. That's why it's my meaning. It's why I do this. And so while at some points it used to feel like a failure, I knew that there was a light at the end of the tunnel, and I'm still trying to search for it. But it's starting to become a little bit more clear as to why things happen for a reason in life and how those things, look at you. There's a reason you do what you do. I
Mm-hmm.
guarantee you, if you didn't experience the things you did as an athlete, especially senior year at Pomfret with the ACL, maybe you wouldn't have decided to go the route that you're in right now. It's the same thing.
Yep.
That's the driving force. So you and I have that in common, which is why I had that conversation with you the day I tore my ACL, because I knew that you would understand. So sorry, I talk a lot, so that's my that's probably the issue with me when I do
Oh,
things like this.
I
But
love
yeah,
it.
that's it.
Well, dude, and that's, that's why it's just so cool to hear your story, because I almost feel like I'm hearing myself tell my story in a sense.
Mm,
Obviously, very different paths in terms of getting to where we are, but at the end of the day, still achieved a purpose, still found a calling through a personal experience that's going to drive us and that's going to motivate us for the rest of our lives. That's
100%,
such a gift.
100%.
So many people go through life wandering, not knowing what they're going to do because they never had that opportunity to experience something that presented them with a gift.
100%.
We got
And
so blessed.
blessed is an understatement, and I say that strongly as someone who has graduated college, but also continues to meet people. I just feel like they're the system is set up where like we're not put in a system and in a place that is supposed to set us up for that same success. Now, I'm not saying you're supposed to find out what your life calling is and love is when you're in your early 20s, 30s, 40s, or even 50s. There are people with grandchildren that don't know what they love to do. What
Right.
I am saying is um, it's a big passion of mine to um, to talk to other people and sort of become a little bit more self-aware about themselves and take a step back and think about the things that they love to do and the things that bring them most happy, that bring us the most happiness in life. And for me, when I was thinking about how does these, how are these experiences at all an asset to me? And I thought about what is the one thing that all of these things have in common? All of them, whether they happened here in Israel, at Elmira, at Pomfret or Curry, they're all because of basketball. Like
Mm.
basketball is the key ingredient. That is the one thing that got me to Pomfret, to Elmira, not necessarily to Curry, but that's where it got me to Israel right now to work. So that, and now you take a step back and you think about like, what are the things that you love the most in life? What are they? What are they? The top three things you love the most in life. And you look at those things, you think about them, you let it marinate, and you think, how do I make that a job? How do I make that a career? How do I make that something, a part of my daily routine? What are the things I can do to experience those, to try them out? And that's how you test the waters a little bit. And
Mm.
it was unplanned, obviously, for your ACL to tear and for me, my ACL to tear, and for those things to happen. But it is a blessing, like you said, Colin, like for us to be able to utilize that as like, that's why you wake up and that's why I wake up for
Mm.
sure. So and that's like, that's priceless. And because we are young and sometimes too young, sometimes it feels
Yeah.
like too young, where like, hold on, I haven't, because I have no fucking, excuse my language, no idea what I want to do for the rest of my life.
Of
But
course.
it feels like I can use this tool and story as motivation to other people to really like tap into what they do, because there's a lot of people that I know who are, they're not doing what they love. And I think
Mm.
a common theme that I'm seeing is they're not chasing the things that really matter to them. They're chasing things that they think are going to matter to them, but at the end of the day, they don't really make the difference, whether it's the salary or the job security or the 401k or the equity or the location. It's like, instead, you know, I try to implore people to really truly tap into the things that they love
Mm.
and forget about those things. I know everyone has their own baggage. You have to pay your bills and you have to, I'm not trying to get into that now, but what I am saying is there is the driving force behind finding something that you truly want to do when you wake up, and going after that and chasing after that and doing what you love and loving what you do. I'm very passionate about that. And so, as you can tell, I'm passionate about that. And um, no, it's cool. It gets me fired up because like I
As it
love having
should. As it
I
should.
love having this conversation. Yeah.
And I think the thing that's so special about it is that it takes a special person to take adversity and to turn it into a tool to create a form of success. right? Because the thing about it is that I don't think people are going to necessarily understand is that, Barak, we had many opportunities during our own personal battles and injuries and struggles to say, I'm just going to hang it up.
100%.
Or I'm just going to say, yeah, nah, this is too much for me. I'm not big enough for this, and just put it to the side. But no, that's not what happened. What happened was is that you decided to accept the challenge, and you decided to put in the legwork, and you decided to turn adversity into something that could fuel you. And it's going to yield an outcome. That's the problem with the world today. People get hit with adversity, and instead of leaning in and turning it into something to motivate, they're turning it into something to negatively affect them. That's the problem.
I have to say that there are a number of people throughout the course of my life that have always chimed in at some point, specific people that always kind of said, like, maybe it's time to hang up the shoes. Maybe it's time to move on to something else. And that was the really easy decision. And I can tell you, Colin, to this day, I sort of knew, like, internally that I was never going to be the best basketball player on the court. I was never going to be the most talented, and I was never going to play professionally like my dream was. I was never going to get that Division I scholarship like my dream was. But I always knew and still know and will always know that bigger than basketball, those decisions I always made to continue to work, to continue to rehab, to continue to do my exercises, to continue to stretch, to continue to trust the process is a reflection of work ethic. And that work ethic is applicable to anything in life, because when you go for a job and you get rejected, what are you going to do? Are you going to go home, or are you going to wake up and try to find the next one? Like, it's work ethic and consistency and habits and routine that I experienced, that you experienced, that is beyond basketball and beyond sport. And it's about everything in life. And I remind myself that the adversity is actually the asset. That's what it is.
It is.
Adversity is life's biggest asset, depending on how you decide to face it.
Correct.
You have two choices when adversity hits you in the face. And so I agree with you, bro. Like, that's powerful shit, because it's very easy to make to take the easy route. It really is. It really, really is. And it's not like I'm hearing myself talk, and I don't want people, like, it's not that this was easy for you or I, no. And I'm talking now as a 26-year-old. When we were 20 or however old we were at Pomfret, like, we were way less mature. We had way less experience, just a different perspective on life. So it wasn't just, flip a coin and we're good. But I feel like, looking back, this is I have permission to speak on it this way. And I'm not trying to make it sound easy, but it takes a lot of courage and heart and bravery to do these things and to face adversity like that. And I look back and I think that these are traits that I had and were able to apply to my life, and you were able to apply at an early age. Like you said earlier, I think you and I definitely clicked because of our level of maturity. I think we both matured at an earlier age, and that's one of the reasons why we clicked. So I agree with you. Like, the adversity is the bottom line here. The adversity and the theme of that being an asset is forever the root of life. Like, I always see it like that.
And it's so true. And the really sad thing about it is that I can't necessarily sit here and say how I made the decision to take the hard way and actually use adversity as an asset. I don't know where it came from. Like you had said, I think personally it was probably character. Right? What is inside of you? What is inside the man or the woman or whatever it is? What is inside the being that makes that person move? That's how the work is going to get put in or not put in. Right? And now what I want to say, I want to hear you talk about, I know in the past you had done it wasn't missionary trips. What are those called when you get a group of people together and everybody goes to Israel and...
Birthright.
Birthright?
Birthright.
Okay,
Birthright.
So I know from talking to you that you had been on birthright trips to Israel in the past.
Yes.
And being an Israeli, obviously, very close to home. That's where you were born and raised.
Born here. Partially. Yeah. So
because I saw that. Oh, okay. I got confused.
I was born here in the States. When I was 6, my family moved to Israel, to Jerusalem, for 2 years. Then we went back to the States after those 2 years, and then I was there in 2011 to play basketball, and then I came back, and then I worked for Birthright, and now I'm Israeli now, so like I live there. But no, I was born in the States, raised in both, if you will.
Gotcha. Well, excuse me, Barak. I
That's
apologize for
okay.
that. Hey,
You still my
you
guy.
know,
You still my
hey,
guy.
you know what they say? The smartest people say the dumbest things, bro. Yeah.
Man, man, you know I love you.
But let's get into that though, right? Because, and again, I might be off base here, but just based off what I was able to pick up, went on a birthright trip, came back, and then it seemed like the gear started to turn a little bit for you.
Mm. So in 2016, I was on a Birthright trip as
Mm-hmm.
a participant. For those who don't know, Birthright is an organization that sends uh, Jewish adults between the ages of 18 and 32, I believe, from the diaspora, so anywhere out of Israel, to Israel on a free 10-day educational exploration trip to learn about Judaism and the culture and learn about Israel. It's paid for by philanthropists and nonprofits. And so I was a participant. In 2016. And then after that, I started to staff trips. Every trip has two pro staff members who help chaperone and staff trips. So in 2016, I went on my birthright. It was the first time I was there. I went in between my sophomore and junior years of college. And it was the first time I was there since 2011 when I played basketball. It was there for 10 days. When I came back, it's 2016. When I came back, it wasn't necessarily because of birthright and the trip was fun and I met a lot of great people. It was me being back in Israel, going back to Jerusalem, seeing my home from 2001 to 2003, being back in the old city of Jerusalem, traveling, that like really brought back this sense of home and roots that I had not tapped into for a long time that I
Mm.
truly missed. And uh, ever since I came back, ever since I got off the plane at Logan that day, something about that experience, just being there, just made me feel different about trying to really think about pursuing some sort of life there, whether it's short term or long term. And then, um, and then, but the real beginning was 2001, 2002, 2003 when my family moved there. I was in first and second grade. We lived in Jerusalem. My brother was in fifth and sixth grade. My dad was studying. My mom was volunteering. And we were there during the Second Intifada, which at the time was a very tense, um, violent period of time between Israel and, we experienced war, if you will, and living in Jerusalem. After the first year, we came back to the States because my parents thought it was a little bit too dangerous, and we came back in the
Mm.
summer. And then we decided to go back to Israel for a second year because we said that my parents felt that 1 year wasn't enough for our family to experience it. So we were there during a very difficult time, and I grew some pretty thick skin as a 6, 7, and 8-year-old. Like saw things and experienced things that I would say the vast majority of people, at least over here, don't really see.
Mm.
And that's where it really started, like just having an appreciation for a different life and a different culture and a different language and humble beginnings and people who serve in the army and just the Middle East. Like it's just different. It's black and white. Um, and then birthright. And then I came back and I was like, man, I didn't go back there as like a birthright participant. I went back there as someone who was like visiting home.
Mm.
It was a homecoming to me, bro. Like I'm getting goosebumps just saying that. Like it really, and that's where it started. And then I love telling this story. I'm gonna try and keep it short, but I had a conversation with my trainer on the phone, my basketball trainer, Rudy, that's summer when I came back. And I was talking to him about college and after college. And I call him and I was like, bro, I have no idea what I want to do after school. I have no idea. And he's like, man, I have this conversation with every college student because none of you guys know it. And you're not
Right.
supposed to know what you want to do.
Of course.
But he stops the conversation and he goes, Barak, what are the three things you love most in life?
Mm.
And I'm on the other line. I'm silent. No, like but he asked me dead serious and I didn't say anything. He goes, Barak, what are the three things you love most in life? And I said, I don't know. I need like a minute to think about it. He goes, Barak, name the top three things you love the most in life. Don't think about anything else. And without hesitation, I said family, basketball, and Israel. Those are the first three things that
Mm.
came out of my mouth. I didn't even think, bro. My brain just said it. And he says, but then you need to figure out how to make those a reality. You need to figure out how to make that a career. And then that, like, for whatever reason, bro, Colin, that was the light bulb for me. That was it. That was it. And I started to think about, you know, what sacrifices am I willing to make? Because I love family, but my family's here. But I love basketball, and this thing about Israel. How do I explore that? Um, and then, I thought about, okay, basketball in Israel. I'm injured. I want to get into training. How do I make that, how do I make that my career, if you will? How do
Right.
I do that in Israel? And then I thought about the number one place I would want to work at in Israel overseas. And I thought about Maccabi Tel Aviv because that's the best program in Israel, the best basketball team in Israel. They're in the EuroLeague. And then I did everything I could for 2 or 3 years to try and get myself into the organization. Long story short, I got myself in there, and then I volunteered there 2 years ago, and then ended up getting a job offer to stay as a head strength coach, and that's what I did last year, and then became a citizen. I'm giving you the very short version, and now I live in Israel. But that your initial question from like 4 hours ago
Oh my, stop, bro. Keep doing your thing, man.
about birthright, your initial question about birthright, it wasn't birthright per se. It wasn't like the program and the educational component of the trip, but it was me having the opportunity and privilege to go on birthright, but also being placed back in Israel,
Mm.
turned on a different chemical in my body, bro. I don't know what to tell you, but it got me in a different state of mind. And that was the beginning of me trying to like create a life for myself over there.
Mm. Now tell me about it. Tell me about Tel Aviv. Tell me about Israel. For somebody who's never been, right?
Mm.
Give me some
Um,
details. Cause I trust you. I trust your judgment. I know you're gonna give it 100% real. So
um, before I tell you about Israel, I would like to say that, like many parts of the world, I don't always think that um, I don't always think that looking the, from the outside looking in that people have necessarily the correct um, idea of Israel or other places and other areas in the world. And I think a lot of it has to do with media and things that get
huh.
posted and conversations that are had. And I don't want to turn this, and I'm not going to turn this into a political conversation. I think that for anyone listening and for anyone watching this video, regardless of if it's Israel or Boston or Florida or Honolulu or Japan, I don't care. In order to really develop your own ideas and thoughts of what you genuinely believe about a place, my personal belief is traveling will change your perspective of a
Mm.
place. And you need to go to a place and experience it yourself and meet the people who live there, that were born there, that eat there, that live there, that pray there, that's their home. Interact with those people, interact with the land, learn the language a little bit, eat some of the food. That is when you are able to develop your own ideas of a place. And so I think I appreciate you asking me because you've never been there. And I am trying to implore people to, instead of coming up with their own ideas and judgments and preconceived notions about a place, instead, hear what you want to hear, but also make the decision maybe to go visit that place or two
Mm.
that you want to learn more about. With that being said, Israel is a very small country. It's about 9 million people. It's about the size of Massachusetts. Um, to just you could put 500 Israels into the States just to give you an idea of how small we're talking.
That's insane.
Um,
Wow.
it's not a very, very big
I
country.
knew it was small, but I didn't know it was that small. Wow.
Very small. It is about a direct flight, 11 to 12 hours from Boston. um, you have the northern part of Israel, which is New Hampshire, if you will, like very mountainous and green and nature and hiking and mountains. And then you go more a little bit more south on the west. You have Tel Aviv, the coast, the
Right.
beaches, and then you have the middle, and then which is a little bit more land, and then to the right you have Jerusalem, the
Mm-hmm.
holy city, and you go south, and then it becomes desert all the way down to Eilat. So you have the unique thing about Israel is like I'm sitting here in Boston right now. If I want to go to the desert, I have to fly to Phoenix. But if I'm in Tel Aviv and I want to go to the desert, I can take a hour trip down south to Beersheba and I'm in the desert. Or if I want to go north, I have to drive to New Hampshire. But if I want to go see green in Tel Aviv, I have about a 30-minute. It's unique. It's like you have a little bit of everything in a very, very
Right.
small chunk of land. Um, I live in Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is the Miami of Israel, if you will. It's a very, very diverse place. Lots of different people, cultures, foods, languages. Um, it's a very hip place, for the lack of a better word. It's very energetic. It's loud, but that's me, and I feed off that energy, and
Right.
that's where I feel the most comfortable. Granted, my family lived in Jerusalem for those 2 years I told you about, and I will say that Jerusalem has its own unique taste to it. It's quieter, it's holy, the people are different, the atmosphere is different. It's more religious people, not all of it, but there's a lot more religious people, and it's a different vibe. Um, Most of the rock in Jerusalem is all ancient Jerusalem rock, so everything
Mm.
is pretty original. Um, and look, man, I will tell you, even though my family sits here, my parents and my brother, my roots, like my friends from like that all lives here. I will say that I feel the most connected to a home, to a base of its own in Israel. It just makes me feel like I'm in the right place. Granted, I speak Hebrew, and I interact with Israelis, and sometimes I feel like I'm from there originally, just because of the time that I've spent there and the relationships I've been able to develop. But it's a really unique place. It's not perfect. There are a lot of things about it that I don't necessarily enjoy and agree with, whether it's, I don't have to get into those things, but it's not a perfect place. But I think that there are a lot of warm people. There are a lot of people who um, grow up with experiences that others necessarily don't, and that helps shape and form them and their personalities. And sometimes Israelis come across as harsh and hard and blunt people, and it's not that they necessarily aren't blunt. I think they are very direct and blunt, but I think there's something to be said and appreciated about that, because
Right.
I find that a lot of them are real and genuine and authentic, and they tell you
Hmm.
how they really feel versus trying to beat around the bush. Um, and they have thick skin, having, you know, because they have to grow up in the Middle East, and because a lot of them have to serve in the army, and it's just different. It's a really, really different place. And I say this to get people who ask me about it all the time, like you, people who have never been there and they want to go. Like, go experience it. There's a lot of people who aren't Jewish. There's many people who aren't Jewish who go to Israel and visit Jerusalem, where Jesus was born. There's a lot of things that are, included in Israel that aren't just necessarily for Jewish people or Israelis. So it's a really unique place.
And what's so, because I want to dive into a couple of things, right? Because you had talked about, in Israel, the conception is that people are harsh, are
Hmm.
blunt, are straightforward. Well, I have a coworker of mine. She's an Israeli herself. I think 100%, and she talks about how most Israelis are very aggressive, very very kind of forward, and is why is that
Is it true?
conception? Yeah, and I just, no, sort of
Yes,
yes
it's
and
true.
no. Now, why do you think that those sort of that verbiage is true? Because I want to try to get into, obviously, with something very relevant to what you had just talked about in terms of Israel not being perfect, and you having to have dealt with, pretty much a war at a very young age, and then now seeing what's going on, and me looking from the outside in, and you being on the inside,
Mm,
hearing the sirens, going into bomb shelters, all that crazy stuff.
hmm.
Dude, go into that. Go into that. Because the first thing I thought of when I saw that, the first thing I did was text you.
Yeah,
I was like,
yeah.
bro. I was like, are you alright, bro? Like, what's
I
going
remember.
on?
Yeah. So, and this is why I remember someone asked me, like, before I went to Israel, they were like, "Are you gonna come back alive?" And
Ooh.
it's like if you spent 13 minutes in Tel Aviv, you would or Jerusalem or in Israel, you would understand that you're not in a place where, like, you leave your house and there are bullets and you have to duck from bullets. Like, it's not just this place where there's war all the time. It's a complicated area in the world. Um,
Now explain
Again, I don't
that.
want
What does that mean, complicated?
Israel sits in a place in the Middle East, under Lebanon, next to Syria, next to Egypt, next to Jordan, close to Iran and Iraq, um, and it's a place that, uh, depending on who you ask, right? Like, because I'm no historian, but depending on who you ask, it's a place where Israelis and Palestinians reside, and it is a very complicated situation between the Israeli and Palestinian governments and control of one or the other, and whose land is whose and who owns what. Um, and there are neighbors that don't necessarily get along with each other, and it creates a pretty complicated situation when you have two groups of people who both either want the same thing or can't come to agreements, and sometimes it leads to violence, or it leads to complicated scenarios. I don't I don't necessarily want to get into the details because as an Israeli, like, you know, I don't always agree with everything that's going on.
Sure.
I'm someone who was born and raised in a house with two rabbis who have taught me and my family, but have taught me my whole life to love and appreciate everyone, regardless of your skin color, your race, your gender, your sexual identity, your religion, it doesn't matter. If you are a nice person, I don't care. Like, I also gave this speech at Pomfret during my chapel
Mm-hmm.
speech called, I gave this speech about loving everyone and not making those judgments off other people based off of what they look like, or what religion they are, or where they come from in the world, or what language they speak. Um, I'm an advocate of peace and love of everyone, and as long as that can happen, then I will always push forward to that. Um, so, like, sometimes it may be hard saying that and digesting that as someone who lives in Israel, because in Israel, when you're on the outside looking in, it looks the complete opposite when you just see that there are these wars that happen, which I experienced very much a little over a month ago in Israel. Um, I think one of the reasons that your coworker said a lot of them are aggressive, and hard, it's because they grow up in a place where you need to have some sort of an alert system on
Mm.
24/7, and you need to be a little bit more aggressive, and you need to be they don't take anything for granted over there, because at any point you can wake up and there's a siren that tells you to go to a bomb shelter. And depending on where you live, you either have 15 seconds or 90 seconds to get there before something lands in your area. So there, you know, they have to be a little bit more aggressive. There's a constant war going on between two groups of people, and it is one of the most, if not the most complicated dilemma I see around the world, and is one that has existed for a long period of time and seems to continue to exist, and I think may forever always exist. I hope not, but that's why your coworker says that, and it's true. Israelis do come off as a little bit more aggressive, but that's because that's a result of the environment that they live in.
Mm.
And it makes sense to me that that's how they end up, because you are a product of the environment that you're raised in. That's who you are. And so, and I think a lot of that sometimes gets mistaken for aggression when you are coming from America or coming from the diaspora, coming into Israel, and you are not used to that level of aggression or that pace. And it's not necessarily, they don't come from an aggressive place. That's just them. Israelis are very warm people, some of the warmest I've met. But you do grow up a little bit there, and it's a little bit of a culture shock. And you do grow some thicker skin. And it is a result of all the things I just mentioned to you. And um, a month and a half ago, we did have a very long week and a half of intensity,
Right.
sirens across the country. And I was in the country for that, and had to go to my bomb shelter, and had to had to go there a couple times, both during the night, in the middle of the night, at 2 a.m., at 3 a.m., and you have a certain amount of time to get there, and you have to wait. After 10 minutes, you can go back up. And if there's another one, you go back down. And we all have an app on our phone that gives you an alert when it's just part of life. It's like, I hate to say this, it's not normal, but it is part of, it's like, you know what to do when there's a siren that goes
Right.
off. You know that if you're on the street, you have to find the closest building to you and get to the staircase, because the staircase is the most stable part of the building. And if you're in your apartment and you have a mamad, which is a shelter room in your apartment, you all go there. And if you don't have one, you go to the shelter, which is usually under the building, and you all go there. These are things that's like, they sound crazy or they sound scary to those who haven't experienced them, of course, because it's not normal. But for people living on that side of the world, or sorry, in Israel, they all know that all new modern buildings, every single apartment is built with a mamad. It's required. Why? For situations like this. We don't have that here. We don't have that here. So um, it's different, man. I could go on for hours about this, but it's different. And even though even though these are true things about Israel and it's the reality, the benefits, I find that there are more benefits to the country there for me personally,
Right.
and that I'm happier there. Um, and after explaining that to some of my friends who aren't from Israel, they would think, well, why would you ever want to experience that? Who wants to go to a bomb shelter? And it's not really about that. It's not really about that. It's about the lifestyle and the people and the experiences I have there. Um, so I know I went off here on a little bit, but yeah, that's Israel.
Dude, I loved it. And the reason, let me tell you this, right? Because I love that you prefaced it by saying you need to go experience it for yourself, right? My whole thought process was behind that question is I want to give Barak the chance to break the negative stigmas around Israel. Because
Mm,
I'll be straight up honest with you. The amount of ignorance that there is about the Middle East as a whole, in totality, is sick.
mm,
It's sick. And
Not just about, I want to make this clear, not just about Israel, about both sides,
right,
how much ignorance
absolutely.
there is,
Out
about
of,
both. Because I don't
absolutely.
stand on one side of the fence, 100%.
And it's just
Want to make that
crazy.
clear.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things. It's so crazy because you see it all the time, right? I'm kind of at a loss of words, but when when people lack the proper perspective but still have the stigma as if they have the right perspective, that's how stuff starts. And it's like I would be doing myself a disservice, Barack, if I didn't ask you that question.
Mm,
Why? Because that built my perspective.
mm,
That gave me a better understanding of something that I would never understand if I hadn't asked you. I can't read that.
100%.
I can't look it up on the internet. You know what I'm saying? And
100%.
that's why I value your opinions on this stuff, right? And that's why I'm so interested to kind of poke and to prod and to learn more about it because I know I'm not the only one.
You're not the
Guarantee.
only one. You're not the only one. But by you asking me that question is the closest thing that you're going to get. Uh, sorry. By you asking me that question is the closest thing you'll get for you to, like, if you weren't able to go to Israel and see it for yourself, the best thing you can do is ask someone who's been there. That's
Hmm?
it. Instead of just reading and consuming stuff online. That's it. By you asking me, you're getting your closest thing to have actually having been there. So um, I appreciate when people are eager to learn more about it and ask me, but not just take my perspective and call it a day. Go ask other people.
Yes.
Go ask others who aren't from the States, who are from a different part of the world, who are from South America, who are from Asia, like, and they came to Israel, who aren't even Jewish. Ask them. And that's how you form your own. Don't just read one Instagram post or one Twitter post or one news post and watch one news channel. Consume raw, authentic experiences, and that's how you form your opinions. See what I'm saying? Like, I think that's important. I think that's important
I
for
mean,
sure.
it's like back when we were in high school or in college, when you do an essay or you do an assignment, you have to get multiple sources. It's weird,
Yes.
but it's true. It's true, right?
Yeah.
It's like you can't just take one source and that be gospel, right? You have to
Hmm.
be a student, and that's something that I'm proud of you for being. I'm proud of myself for being. Is that we're students of life. We
Mm.
never take anything just at face value. We always try to dig a little bit deeper than what meets the eye, because
Mm.
that's where you see the real, authentic truth. Why do you think there's so
100%.
much polarity just in the world today? We've never been more connected but more disconnected ever in my entire life as a human
Facts.
being.
Facts.
Because there's information that's so readily available that it allows people to be lazy and it stopped them from wanting to be students. They don't want to learn
Mm.
about life anymore.
It's real. And and our attention spans have just become shorter over time, so that a headline is enough for someone to form their own opinion, right? Or or a 15-second Instagram clips on, story is enough for them to form their own. So I agree. Like, it's a sad reality, and people like you and I can only help but change that narrative.
And we're doing the best we can by doing this right now. That's why
Doing the
that's
best
why
we
this is
can.
so much fun, right? Because hey,
Big facts.
this might only reach 4 people, but one person might be enough to change the world, bro. You know?
100%.
And now
That's real.
let me ask you this, Brock. Because again, this is more so trying to learn, right? How much of a perspective builder was it for you to go through? Because everything, the whole incident, you know, the whole Israel is under attack, that started May 10th, correct? Was that the first initial declaration that Israel is under attack, if I'm correct?
Um,
Not that it necessarily matters that much. I'm just trying
I
to make sure that I'm punctual and precise.
I think around that time. That sounds about right.
Okay.
That sounds about right. Yeah, yeah.
Now, like, how much of a perspective builder was that for you to experience something like that, which, even though you're always prepared, you probably, in your mind, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, with maybe hoping or maybe even thought, maybe ignorantly, and maybe this is just my perspective because I don't understand it, ignorantly thinking that that's not going to happen. You know, how much of a perspective builder was it for you to actually hear the sirens and to be in the
So
shelters and to ask yourself those questions of what happens next?
I'll never forget this. Um, I was in the shower, uh, the first siren I heard,
Mm.
and I was in the shower, and ironically before that I was on my way back home with someone, uh, and this was when Israel is under fire. Sort of the conversation started happening. I looked at him and I said, like, if I'm in the shower and the siren goes off, what do I do? And 2 hours later, I was in the shower and the siren went off. So, I turned the water off. I didn't know if it was innate, and I listened. I was like, for 2 or 3 seconds, I was like, yeah, that's real. So, took my towel. I'm in the middle of the shower. I'm dripping. I go all the way downstairs. I'm enter the. I'm laughing because I enter the shelter and I'm dripping wet in the towel, and everyone else. That's how I entered the shelter. It's all the people who live in the apartment building. This is how we meet. This is my meet and greet with my fellow neighbors.
What's
I'm
good,
dripping.
baby?
And one guy, I'm going down the stairwell, and one guy who's also in a towel in the stairwell, he looks at me he's like, you have 90 seconds, right? Like I could have went and like changed my clothes. But, for me, it's like I hear something. I'm not just going to turn on my clock and see how much time I have left. I'm just going to go, right? So standing in the shelter, it's not like as intense as you might think it might be. It's patience. It requires patience. You wait. We heard things. You feel things. It's a little bit of a shock to the system, but I must say that I feel safer in Israel than I do in the States. As
Ooh.
a as a man, as a man, who like I was raised in a very comfortable area, but I've been in very many non-comfortable areas. I I can say that I feel safer in Israel day and night, alone, not alone, at the airport, not at the airport, in Israel than I do in the States. It's just a fact. I just do. And I know that there are a lot of other people who aren't from Israel who have been there who can attest to that.
Mm.
And that sounds very misleading when I'm here talking to you on a podcast about missiles being sent over. But it's a different narrative. There's no one, you can't just go buy a gun in Israel. You don't have guns in Israel. There's no gun shops. You can't just go get a gun permit. You can't just go get a gun and then walk into a synagogue and shoot it up. You can't just go get a gun and walk into a middle school and go shoot it up. You can't. Like, that, those things happen here. Those things have happened here. They
Mm-hmm.
continue to happen here. You don't know what someone has in their car. Now, do dangerous acts happen in Israel? Yes, they do. But there are, I feel as if at least as many as they can, preventative measures to prevent those things. But I really, like, I mean this, genuinely feel safer there than I do here. As a result of the army and the security and the systems put in place. But the sirens and the missiles and that was a very, it became a routine. Like every single day there was one. And at night, I wasn't able to really sleep because you were just waiting for it. And then it happened, and you go down to the shelter, and then you wait, and you never know. So it's just a waiting game and waiting game, and it went on for a week and a half. Um, but that's part of the life there, man. Like that's part of, I'm lucky, and because I was in Tel Aviv, there are people and families that live on the border down in south next to Gaza, in Sderot, in Ashkelon, in Ashdod, places that are visible from your window. They don't have 90 seconds. They have 15 seconds.
Mm.
If you're in the shower and you have 15, that's your time frame. You have 15 seconds. So um, I'm saying this as someone, yeah, I was there, but there are people who had it harder and had it worse. Um, and and you sort of, it's difficult. It's heavy. Like, you sort of grow an appreciation for the kind of lives that they have to live, because it doesn't matter what time of the day or night it is, but at any point that can happen. It doesn't matter what you are doing. You have 15 seconds. And so I'm over here privileged in Tel Aviv. I got 90 seconds. The guy upstairs in his towels taking his time. Like, it's different, man. It's a different world. It's a different life. But yet somehow that's still home, and that's the place that I love.
And how was it for you, Barak? How long did it take you to really kind of adjust, right? Because just listening to the differences, kind of the compare and contrast between the States and Israel, like you said, it sounds like a different world. I'll take your word,
Mm-hmm.
and it is a different world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how long was it? Was it hard to make that transition to become, to be there for 2 years consistently? Was it hard to kind of get to that point where you could really, I don't want to say be comfortable per se, but actually feel like maybe you had a place, or that you belonged, or that you actually understood, how to function?
It's a really good question. Um, when I got there in 2019, I was on a work visa. My Hebrew was not what it is today, and I was there to volunteer my life for a basketball team that I dreamed of working for. And I would say I was less Israeli at the time, if you will. Granted, I knew where I was, and I'm not just a foreigner, like a full foreigner, first time there. Excuse me. Um, but that first year, being in Tel Aviv and the experiences I had, and then being able to get a job offer to to be the head strength coach at a different team in Israel, was like that was my level up, and that's where I realized, like, I'm starting to find my place here. Um, my Hebrew improved, my network grew, the people I know, just building my name, who I am there. And I remember, like, the first date I went on when I got into Tel Aviv, like, I was so shy with my Hebrew. I used a little bit, but I would talk in English. It's like everything in my life there now is in Hebrew. And to see that evolve over time is really unique. And to see how I identify more with the people and the culture there is really unique. And it was very hard, because my initial plan was to go there and come back after that first year, to reset, see my family, just like unload. And then the night before my flight in August, I got a job offer that I could not pass down. And like 10 hours before my flight, I just called home and I said, I can't come back. I have this offer. I got to do it. And I canceled the flight. I stayed in Israel. Then COVID hit.
Mm.
And, I was in Israel alone, um, working for this team, trying to build this team. And we were on and off because of COVID and lockdowns and closures. And then I got sick with COVID 2 days before our first trip to Poland. So the team went to Poland without their head strength coach, and I was sick with COVID, and my family
Oh,
sitting here in the States. A lot of things happened. Um, but uh, I pushed through, and I never gave up. And, like, I never said this is too shitty for me to be in. And I think that same mentality is the same mentality that I was talking about earlier with being injured as a basketball player, like, just not giving up, because I know that this is what I want to do. And yeah, like, tons of adversity. I experienced a ton of it the past 2 years, but, like, it's the same concept here. How am I going to look at the adversity? What am I going to do here? So I just see that as a common theme, regardless of what I do and where I am in life. And in Israel, I faced plenty of adversity. Um, and, and so those 2 years, now I feel very connected to Israel, and I have a bank account, and I negotiate job contracts in Hebrew, and I speak Hebrew, and I am a citizen. Like, I can vote now. I'm Israeli. You know, I'm Israeli.
Bro, I love it, bro. You know, it makes me
Yeah,
so happy to see you say that, and you take such pride in it too, bro. That's awesome, man. No, like for real. For
I
like,
appreciate that.
eh,
It's
bro.
and I just want to say, like, I just want to say, I was gonna come home after the first year, and I didn't plan on making Aliyah. Making Aliyah is when you immigrate to Israel, when you become a citizen. I didn't plan on doing it um, because I felt like I needed that break to see my family. I feel like I needed to be with them to unload and to digest and to just think about what I want to do. But I ended up staying, ended up having that job, ended up canceling that flight. And it was just a no-brainer for me. It was like, I don't need more time here to figure this out. I already know what I want to do. So I
Hmm.
pulled the trigger and I did it, you know, I immigrated while I was already in Israel because I was physically already there. A lot of people make Aliyah like they move from America or from to Israel. I was already there. So it was just a matter of getting paperwork and birth certificates and background checks and things sent over from the States, but I was already there. So I just went to the office. It takes about an hour and you walk out as a citizen. And and have my ID card now. So it was just unique and will always be written in history that like I did all this alone. Like 24 months I wasn't home. I didn't see, it was just doing this. Skypes, my family with my brother, filling them in on my life virtually, digitally. Like I have a life of my own. I'm a full grown adult. I have a career there, things that they've never seen. And it's bizarre because those are all the things that you want to expose to the people closest to you. And so it was a very long period of time that I'll never forget, but has shaped and molded me into a very, very more mature, better person. Um, while I'm Israeli American now, American Israeli, it doesn't change who I am and the things I believe in and the people I love. I feel the same way when I'm around my parents now that I have my whole life. Like I haven't changed. I've changed, but of course I've changed. I've grown, but I'm still me. You know what I mean? My English has gotten much shittier, but that's besides the point. um, um,
Oh
so
man.
those 2 years have been good. I want to let you know I have to get off in like a minute or two.
Cool.
So I know I could stay on with you for until the nine,
Last thing,
dude.
real
Like I,
quick. Last thing.
yeah.
Do you plan on how long are you thinking to stay in Israel for? Forever?
How long do you think about you're going to stay in Florida for?
Good question. Don't have an answer to.
How long do I want to stay in Israel for? Until the day that I know it's not for me.
Mm. Well, I'll
I
tell you
can
what.
always come back.
Well, I'll tell you
I can
what.
always come back.
I'm going out there. Just know that. Just know that
Facts.
I'm coming out there,
Facts.
and I'm about to see you
100%.
be the head strength coach for was it Maccabi?
The first team I worked for was Maccabi Tel
Maccabi.
Aviv. And now I work or this past year I worked for a team called Ness Ziona, which is another city outside of Tel Aviv.
Oh, hey, bro. Whatever team
Yeah.
you going to next, I'm gonna pull up. And I'm gonna be in the
I got you with
stands.
tickets. I got you with tickets. I got you.
Yeah.
I got you with tickets.
Oh my goodness, hey Brock, for real, man. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much, bro. For real,
This has been so fun.
it
This
feels
has been
so
so fun.
good
I'm
catching up.
sorry I have to cut short. We got to do another episode. Honestly,
That's the thing we have to,
we got to do that.
because we can
Yeah,
keep this rolling forever. But yes, well,
100%.
we're gonna bring back another episode one of these days. But my man, Barak, I appreciate you, bro. I love you so much, man. Thank you
Love you too,
so
bro.
much for your time, bro. For real.
100%.
And bro,
Always,
we will
always.
be in touch. But guys, thank y'all so much for watching. I appreciate it. This is a very special guest. It's literally my brother right here. And man, I'm glad y'all got to see our first interaction in a little while because it's been a while. But
Been a while.
alrighty, y'all. Until next time, we'll see you later.